My name is Perry Brown. I'm the Provost at the University of Montana, and you are, of course, here for the Provost Distinguished Faculty Lecture by Beth Lowe. She will be introduced in just a minute by Dean Stephen Klum. But just want to say a little bit about the lecture series. We have tried to honor faculty members, particularly who have received some award or special honor during the year from either an international or national organization, and somebody that has really reached sort of a pinnacle of recognition by people outside the university, particularly, and in the case of Beth, that is really true. And of course, as you know, she's internationally known for her ceramics and things that she has produced, and she's known for the students she has developed. And so we're really really pleased to have her here this evening. I would tell you also there is one more lecture this fall, and that's Greg Pape from Creative Writing, and that'll be on November 30th, same time, same place. No, sorry. Yes, same time, same place. And it was the same time. I had to make sure it's the same place, because we actually did one at a different place this year. So anyway, but that'll be on the 30th of November. So we will look forward to any of you that want to participate in that too. I will apologize myself for leaving a little bit early, but I need to slip out about 7:10, 7:15 to get to another event tonight. But Steve Klum will handle the question and answer period, the facilitation of that, and he's going to now come forward and introduce Beth to you. So Steve? Stephen.
Thank you, Provost Brown. Welcome everyone here. Good evening. And it's an honor to introduce a colleague who I respect so much as an artist, as a teacher, and as a human being. Beth Lowe, I'm going to tell you a little bit brag about her here, because I know she won't brag about herself. She's quite modest. Beth Lowe is a distinguished national and international contributor to the field of ceramics. Last year, she brought great distinction to both the University of Montana and the College of Visual and Performing Arts when she was one of 50 American artists named as a USA Hoy Fellow. Her work has been featured on the cover and as the cover story in the American Craft magazine, at the Ceramics International Invitational in Beijing, China, and in a variety of exhibitions in Mexico, Taiwan, the People's Republic of China, Germany, and in major venues throughout the United States. Her work has also appeared in the Chinese Ceramic Newsletter in Beijing, the New York Times, Ceramic Monthly, and Ceramic Art and Perception, and has been acquired by Microsoft Corporation. The University of Washington School of Medicine, Cheney Cowles Art Museum in Spokane, and many other prestigious venues. She's received many awards, numerous, including National Endowment of the Arts Visual Artist Fellowship Grant, a Montana Arts Council Individual Artist Fellowship, and an American Craft Museum Design Award. Her international honors include being chosen as a presenter at the Non-Governmental Organizations Conference on Women in Beijing, China in 1995. A first-generation Chinese-American, much of her ceramic and mixed media artwork revolves around issues of family and ethnicity. She also incorporates into her work calligraphy by her aunt, as well as her mother's traditional floral brush painting. Perhaps she'll talk a little of that tonight, I'm sure. She collaborated with her sister, Ginny Lowe, on a children's book, Mahjong All Day Long, which was published in 2005. And the book received the 2006 National Marion Vinette Ridgway Award and was designated a Montana Book Award Honor Book. In addition to Beth's talents as a visual artist, she's also quite accomplished as a musician. She's a superb bass player and vocalist, and has played in several ensembles, including, I think you can hear her, you still play at the Hilton? No more. With Salsa Loca and the nationally recognized Big Sky Mud Flaps. She's an alumna of the UM Department of Art and received her Master of Fine Arts degree in ceramics in 1974. As a professor of art, she's taught ceramics, sculpture, foundations, and drawing at the University of Montana since 1985, when she was hired to replace her mentor, Rudy Audio. She twice received the School of Fine Arts Distinguished Faculty Award, and in 2008 was featured as an Odyssey of the Stars honoree and inducted into the College of Visual and Performing Arts Hall of Honor. Beth delights in her role as a teacher and mentor, and is a favorite with her students and her colleagues, her staff, and her dean. My friend Frank Zappa once said that art is making something out of nothing and selling it. Fortunately for us, Beth Lowe, for art, is making something out of clay, paint, and ink, and transforming lives. Ladies and gentlemen, Beth Lowe.
That was a really nice introduction, and I have to thank Stephen for that. Okay, I'm going to turn on the...
There we go. Okay. Broadcast. Woo. All over the place. I got to give thanks where thanks are due. We're starting with since this is a Provost lecture series, I have to start with thanking former Provost Roy Sangstrom, and of course, Stephen Kalm, Dean of the College of Visual and Performing Arts, and our School of Art Director, Julia Galloway, and my colleagues and students who are here tonight, and the folks from the community. I see lots of familiar faces. It's great to see you guys, and thank you for coming. I'm going to be showing a bunch of slides of work, and they really range pretty far and wide from all the different kinds of threads of work that I've worked on. And it's a longer slideshow than the last slideshow I did, because I've been alive for another 5 years since the last time I did one of these. So hopefully you guys don't get too bored in the middle. What the overall sense that I would like to deliver here is kind of how you figure out what you want to do when you're an artist, and how the research might be a little bit different from other kinds of research. The last few times, actually, that I have done this slideshow, it's been mostly in art departments, and so I'm talking to more of an art audience, and I felt like maybe with this Provost lecture series, I might just say one thing that I think is a little bit different about research that I do than the research that some of these other wonderful professors have done over this lecture series that have been honored, and as I am so honored to be here. I think that when you get into the arts, you don't know what you're going for. The goal isn't out there. You're not going to try to figure out why the bees have died. You just have this kind of sense that there is something out there that you're trying to get at. And so your goal is unknown, and the question that you're going for is unknown. But what you do know is that you have, at least I felt like from a very early age, that I sort of had this pressure inside of something that I wanted to say, and I didn't know what it was going to be. And I also felt like I liked to make stuff. So I knew that I had process, and I knew I had this urge. And I didn't know what art was, but every time I made a step or made something, I would recognize it. And I think that's a characteristic of art that is different from some other types of research. There's a sense of recognition where, yeah, aha, that's it. That's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to follow. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my path and how it went like this and ended up with a kind of a body of work that focused pretty much on family. So I'm going to try all these nice little devices. I wanted to say also that I feel extremely lucky to live in Montana. I came out here for graduate school, and I have come to absolutely depend on getting out into the land. It just absolutely keeps me sane, keeps me alive. And I think that there is something that you would call an aesthetic reaction or an aesthetic experience when you see the landscape. And this is up in Glacier from last summer, and I think that this aesthetic reaction is very similar to what happens when you look at art, But the main difference is that in art, it's something that's made by man. So it has this quality of affirming the human endeavor or the human presence. And I think that's a little bit different. It's the same thing because it's uplifting and it's enriching and affirming, but you get this this sense of community with your fellow man because it's something that man has created, and it creates that same kind of feeling. Montana, when I came here, it just felt open to me. I felt like anything could happen when I moved here from the flatlands of Indiana. And part of that was Mr. Rudy Audio, who was my teacher, and someone who was very wise, and someone who had very high standards of art, but he didn't push you too hard. You just got the sense that he knew what was going on, and you could get little gems from him here and there. And he was a very, very generous man, and I'm really pleased that I was privileged to study under him. I think of the word inspiring when I think of him, and to me that means not just that, wow, he was good, but inspiring to me means that it makes you want to do something as well. It creates movement inside. So that was, I'm happy to pay tribute to him, and I'm really happy I have his office. So when I came to Montana, I was pretty much doing some pretty simple pottery forms and exploring clay in lots of different ways. And when I got here, I thought, oh gosh, I could do sculpture, I could do all different kinds of things. But one thing that I discovered that I loved was the seductiveness of porcelain. And as I said before, one of the early things that you learn when you're going to be an artist is that you like material, you like process. And so little glimpses of things hit me with porcelain. It's got a huge, rich history in China. And I like the fact that you could kind of draw on this beautiful, clean white surface. And the material itself was really seductive and silky. And I had a feeling of completely losing the sense of time when I was working with ceramics. But what are you going to say with that? It's hard to know where that could go. Around in the 1970s, that long ago time when I went to school here, Frida Kahlo wasn't this pop icon that she is now. She was relatively unknown, and I saw her work in one of those little tiny squares in Art in America, the little reviews in the back, and I just went right to it and went, that speaks to me. And I think that the kinds of things that artists do for other artists is they open doors for, we open doors for each other. So somebody, you may see something and again get that wonderful feeling of recognition, and you go, oh, well, I can make work about autobiography. I can make work about personal psychological pain. I can make work about ethnicity. I can make work about my own image because it works. So the history of art kind of progresses in this kind of way, where artists open doors for other people and allow them to find a vocabulary to work in. So for me, Frida Kahlo did all those things, as well as sort of raise the banner that was in the 70s feminist movement of the personal is political. What that ended up being for me, let's see, what's that little gizmo there? That probably doesn't need to be there. Well, I'll just, I'm not sure how to get rid of it, so we'll just let that be there for a little while. Maybe it'll go away on its own. Anyway, I was doing a series of vases at the time, and they were mostly really decorative and abstract. And I didn't really, I just was interested in how abstract form worked together, how a mark here or a line there or a color there all kind of added up to a particular kind of tension that I was trying to put in the work. And then this piece kind of happened all by itself, and I realized I was always using this triangle shape on the front and the back of these pieces, and I realized, oh, this could be hair, this could be a face, and this face that kind of showed up looked vaguely Chinese. And again, I got that feeling of recognition, and it said to me, this is something I need to follow. This is important. This is an opening for me. And so I began to kind of think about being more direct with my imagery. I got the job teaching at University of Montana about this time based on a series of those vases that had gotten a little bit of attention in galleries. And so I was working along, and then like halfway through my first year there, I got pregnant. And all of a sudden, I didn't even want to touch clay. I just wanted to have nothing to do with it. And when I got done with working at the end of the day, I just wanted to flop. So one thing that happened is that you still end up with that little bit of that art urge. So the simplest thing to do is to just kind of shove everything off the kitchen table and draw. And so I started drawing pictures of a baby way before the baby was even born. Oh, are you going to get rid of it for me?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. I'll just keep going until we get there. Oh, there we are. Yep. So, yay, tech people. Anyway, and then after my son was born, my son Ty, who is now 23, after he was born, I realized that I wanted to draw these little Chinese babies, and I wanted to draw them in such a way that they filled the page and gave me the sense of like Mao in Tiananmen Square. It's like this huge presence that could not be ignored. And little things started coming in that you'll see later on, the hands and the boats, the origami boats. And having a child made me have a whole different sense of time, made me want to work more directly in the same way that my pregnancy did. I just wanted to get to the issue and not beat around the bush. So my imagery became a lot more direct. I'm going to kind of jump around here and introduce a couple other themes. Actually, first this one. So I drew a lot of these. I made a lot of these stacking vessels and had babies sitting on mothers' heads that was almost like a, clamped on. Ah! You can't get away from it. And so this piece is called Night and Day, You Are the One. Had little things like the crossed fingers for good luck and for sort of a little feeling of superstition. So there are a whole series of these. And as with most of the work here, these are like little samples of the series of works that I was doing at the time. But as I said, I'm going to diverge a little bit here. And another thing that happened as I was thinking about having a child, my parents came and helped me take care of Ty, because I had a cesarean and I wasn't doing too well. So they came and stayed with us for about 6 weeks and helped me with the baby. And all of a sudden, I had a whole different appreciation of what it meant to be a parent and what it meant. And I was so happy to have this new relationship with my parents. And so I started thinking more and more about their lives and their lineage, and started thinking of my family in this linear way, going back. And so, again, in a more direct fashion, more naturalistic, I did these. I've done a series of works, and this is the beginning of what's called the Family Album Series. And this is an early piece of slipcast figurines called Legal Aliens. And the idea that I was thinking about, or the stories that I started thinking about in terms of their lives, were that first of all, that my father wore more traditional Western clothes, Western clothes, and my mother wore the more traditional qipao and was more conservative in kind of the roles that they played there. And then also the fact that although they got citizenship, they were still considered aliens. So I sort of painted their faces with this kind of TV snow look. It also opened the door to all kinds of Chinese cultural imagery and important things in Chinese culture. One of these are the Buddhas and the hands, the mudras. And so the hands have become a pretty big issue for me. About the time that my son Ty I will be picking up on the children and the family album series, but I'm going to talk really quickly about sort of another thread that happened, which is working off of these ideas of these hands, again, really large. These are on pieces of sheetrock. They're about 5 feet tall. And my father died when my son was about 3, and I had a very strong urge to work large, and it, you know, it's kind of a visceral thing, but I felt like the hand was second. I didn't want to draw big pictures of him. That didn't seem right, but it seemed like the hand was maybe the second most personal way that we relate to the world, and the second most important aspect of identity. So a lot of the things that I was working on with the sheetrock come from ceramics, very material based. So I figured out, how can I use this sheetrock in a way that explores the material? So I did a lot of things like ripping paper. So the brown is the first surface of the paper, ripping off. Pounded a lot of nails into this very receptive material. A lot of them go in sideways rather than end in, so that you can see the full nail. And then I would attach things to them, and I liked the hardware relationship. So that's a mahjong tile in the middle of the hand, and an origami boat that's sort of bas-relief on the right. And I just did a whole series of these. And I thought a lot about that sort of clinging feeling again of the mother, the son on the mother, with those origami things kind of glommed onto the hands. And the big brown hand on the left, again, is just, you take a big sponge to the surface of sheetrock and wipe, and pretty soon you're down to the brown. And then I did a bunch of stuff where you work on into the plaster. I did a bunch of pieces where you score it and bend it and fold it. But anyway, just a few things. A lot of these pieces had calligraphy on them. This piece is based on, this is the one that's scored and folded. And this piece is called Envelope. I'm sorry, it has a title. It's not untitled. And it is based on the funerary envelopes that you can buy in Chinatowns, where they have all the burnable things that you want to take to the next afterlife. Like they'll have a watch, and they'll have clothes, and they'll have shoes, all tucked into these little envelopes, money. Another little Chinese cultural thing that I wanted to work with about the same time was the origami form. So I started working with these more three-dimensionally, and the game of mahjong, which was really important in our family. And so I made a series of these carved porcelain pieces with just like still lifes of putting these objects together. This is called Still Life with Winds. And I felt like the white porcelain, white is the funerary color in China. And all of these still seem to sort of relate both to family and kind of a spirituality. This is a more recent version made as if the papers, I bought funerary papers and folded them up, and this is what they look like with this would be as if you take the funerary money, which has this gold leaf on it, and fold it up, and they would turn into these origami animals. Okay, so back to having kids again. Another important influence for me is Mary Cassatt. And the reason I think that she is really wonderful is because she was able to portray this relationship between mother and child in a way that is not cloying. Somehow or another, she managed to have that feeling of relationship and love and interdependence without giving you this feeling of Hallmark. So I think that's she had a quite an important contribution to make, although she never had kids of her own. So I'm going to talk about, and then another person that's important to me is Fernando Botero, and he is a Colombian artist who, the reason that I've always loved his work, I think his figures are very funny, and a lot of them have a little bit of social commentary. He does a lot of parodying and satire of the ruling classes and the wealthy, and everybody is really chubby in his images and kind of ballooned out, and he's a pretty big man himself, and he's always said when interviewed, "Oh, they don't look fat to me." And I think one of the things that I think about is that you have these ways of abstracting a figure that look right to you. And these good children, as I'll call them, so this is a good children series that's lasted on till today, are all have these little tiny hands and have these funny proportions, but they just look right to me. They don't feel exaggerated to me, and I think it has to do with vulnerability and powerlessness and fragility, some of the kinds of things that are associated with children. So I started doing good children platters for fairly soon after my son was born, and they got older and older as Ty got older as well. So this is sort of a middle series. You can see these are done in 2008, and this is a series where all the series in general, the good children, it's sort of a parody on the idea that there is a good child at all, that you can define that, because there are so many different kinds of kids and the multiple intelligences and all those kinds of things. I saw Megan McNamer walk in, and we share a joke because I made a Good Children t-shirt for Clark Fork School when our kids were at that school, and some parents were outraged that I should even claim to have good children. So anyway, I actually, it's very much of a satire on myself as a parent who is always trying to figure out, what's the best way to raise a good child. So these children are generally doing sort of way precocious things, so that they are working. There's mathematical equations that are probably way beyond their age ability, but this series of platters called Work Play is also sort of investigating the notion of what is work and what is play, and how sometimes they are the same thing, or you would have some person would have an attitude towards the same activity that would be the opposite of what someone else would have. This might be work to someone, it might be play to someone else, and that the most wonderful thing is when they become the same thing, when your work is your play, and when that happens, this incredible flow happens, I feel like. And I used to think this was only in art, but I think it's in music, of course, and of sports, and in other sciences, when you get so into your work that it's just a pleasure, and you experiment and you try things, and so I just think that's an interesting thing that we have those two words, and we talk about we'll work it out or play with it when we talk to our students. Here's some kids performing for a school assembly with the proud parents in the background. Just another manifestation of the kinds of ways I use these good children just as a decorative element in some onigama wood-fired tea bowls. These good children are not without precedent. They are in Confucian art. They are in, but most directly for me, they're in the socialist realist art of communist China, where the kids are often portrayed as extremely healthy, fat, rosy-cheeked, happy contributors to the revolution. And there were many, many posters that had these good kids harvesting, or in this case, practicing to be a soldier. And that's kind of the feeling that I wanted to get with some of these figurines. So these are the most direct ones that I did in terms of having the reference to the Red Guard or the red handkerchief. We just watched a movie last night about North Korea. It's still just like this. The kids in school are wearing these things. They do everything for the general. It's very interesting. But this is gone in China now, or pretty much gone. And I'll talk about current China some more later. This making of these two-dimensional cartoony figures into three-dimensional form was actually a pretty big step for me. It's funny how inhibited you can be when you're making art and you go, well, you mean I could maybe actually build these as sculpture? And I didn't really make that step until after I had seen the Tang Dynasty figurines in China. They're funerary figures for the most part, but they have a huge amount of power in addition to being very doll-like. They don't seem cute at all. Or if they have a cuteness, they have something beyond cuteness. They pervert cuteness in a way. And the Tang Dynasty figurines, a lot of them were women. A lot of them express the fact that in the Tang Dynasty, women had more power in China than they had any other time in history, except for perhaps in some ways during the Cultural Revolution. But the Tang Dynasty women, that was the only time there was a woman emperor, actually, an empress was in the Tang Dynasty. But they had lots of freedom. They were sexy, and they rode horses, and they wore men's clothing, and they did all kinds of things. So they were an inspiration for me for making a lot of these figurines into 3 dimensions. Bamboo comes into play because bamboo is one of the most important materials in China. It's used for everything from musical instruments and fans and decorative objects to scaffolding for skyscrapers and food. They eat bamboo shoots. So it's also a metaphorical material. A lot of the times the Tang poets and other poets use bamboo as a metaphor for how to live. You bend with the wind, you're hollow, but you're strong. All those kinds of things are very, very wonderful. So I thought it would be a nice thing to just use bamboo a little bit. So this is, my mother named this piece. I said, what am I going to call this? And she said, well, it's Girl with Bamboo Stick. I said, yeah. Couple other images. A lot of things in China are done in pairs. So this is rice and tea, tea and rice. And these are a couple of little doll-like figures that are standing on furniture. Thank you to China Woods that brought Chinese furniture to Missoula, and I got really turned on by Chinese furniture and incorporated some of that into my work. And the staples of tea and rice being extremely important in China. They have little drawers that are held in with magnets, those really powerful magnets, so when you push them in, they go, and it's a very satisfying feeling. And they're filled with rice and tea. I'm going to point out on the head of this one, there's some sort of loose calligraphy. That's the running style of calligraphy. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about calligraphy later on, but that is a paper collage of calligraphy from my aunt in China, Lo Huiyan, and I'll talk a little bit more about her later. A couple more figures that were made during the 2008 election when there was all this uproar about Obama not wearing a lapel pin. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about patriotism and maybe the power of music in patriotism. So this piece is called Anthem and Harmony. And there's the electric guitar and the USA lapel pin, and then an acoustic guitar or ukulele perhaps, and a Mao button. The little girl's wearing a Mao button. So it's like I just really questioned the idea that people would call somebody not patriotic for not wearing a lapel pin. Another important influence for me is kitsch figurines from China, and I will say that all this interest in China is really wonderful, but it's pretty recent. It really kind of came since I had my child, because during high school I didn't want to have anything to do with being Chinese. I was really not comfortable. I wanted to be an all-American girl, and so, it was a big change for me to kind of slowly come to the idea of embracing the things that I grew up with and the things that were Chinese, that were important to me. And so I like these American Chinese half and half things very much. And I went to a Chinese family camp when I was in high school that was for kids that were born in the United States of Chinese parents, and we had this common experience and really got along great. So that I'm probably 90% American and 10% Chinese, but I do love some of the aspects of Chinese culture. So these racist figurines, I have a huge collection thanks to certain friends that find them for me in antique stores. And so I've done a bunch of work with the idea of these little, modeled after some of these little figurine forms. So this piece is called Come, Go. It was made about the time that my son was going off to college, and I was just thinking about that idea of coming and going, and again, in the origami boats The figures are China painted. The characters, the calligraphy is done in epoxy. Some other amazingly good children are the 8 immortals, making the 8 immortals into children, the 8 Taoist immortals. Some details, again, China paint, which is one of the traditional techniques in ceramics. In kitsch ceramics is China paint. A couple of figurines. And then another influence for me are cartoons. I think that cartoons are a really important visual art form for people of my generation, leading to artists like Kenny Scharf or Roy DeForest, who use comic book imagery, R. Crumb, those kinds of people. But I was just an addict for comic books. Probably today's equivalent are the video games. But for me, comic books were the things that were sort of a little bit naughty, maybe not. You weren't supposed to be reading comic books, but we were addicted. We'd read them secretly. We'd save up our money and go buy comic books. And that one of the comic books that I loved the most was Little Lulu. And Little Lulu was a good girl. She was, not only was she a child that was very smart, but she was always trying to figure out how to do things in a good way. But she would transgress sometimes too. But she was a great sort of person that I could really relate to. So Little Lulu, and then I managed to find this DVD in China of Little Lulu in China. I thought that was pretty good. So the thing about comic books is this an amazing device of having speech bubbles to tell a narrative. And I've loved that idea. So I made a bunch of slip cast figurines. I have about 6 different figures that have and 4 or 5 different speech bubble shapes, and I can put them together in different combinations, and it's just this great venue for saying all kinds of different things. And so this says, "We all with one heart love our country," and again, it's another investigation into patriotism. We all love our country. Pretty much every nationality finds a way to love their country, and it sort of seems like, how can you put down, it's a leveling kind of thing. This piece was purchased by the Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. Detail. And another piece with speech bubbles, this is called Made in USA, and you have the dictionary sounding out of the word China and then the word China in Chinese. And there's some wonderful things you can do with multiples as well. You have the same figure saying different things. It does a kind of interesting thing. This piece is called All Look Same. It's from the website All Look Same, where you go and you try and they flash all these different Asian faces and you get tested on to see if you can tell if they're Korean or Malaysian or Singapore or wherever. And I got like below average, way below average. But in any case, these are 4 words that say same. It's Korean, Japanese, Chinese, and English. This piece is purchased by the Missoula Art Museum. This piece is called More, and this piece is in Helena. I have a show opening with Catherine Mallory, who's here tonight. We have a show opening in the Artworks Gallery at the Holter Museum this Friday in Helena. And this piece, in a slightly different configuration, is in that show. And this piece is in there too. And those pieces were both made after my most recent trip to China, in which China has become much more of an economic power and is much more proud of itself now than it has been in quite a while. And my relatives that I know over there are saying, China number 1. And I think it's interesting to see how this huge population of people is dealing with its wealth. Just a little bit more about this socialist realist work. This is a socialist realist sculpture in Tiananmen Square in Beijing, and the heroic quality of these figures was something that I wanted to capture in the series called the Family Album series, which was started with a piece called Legal Aliens. And it's just another manifestation of looking at something Asian and figuring out something in my life that I wanted to express in a certain kind of way. And so these are sculptures developed off of the photo albums that belong to my mother and to my relatives in China. So visiting China, and you know, they are great about entertaining themselves. There's a lot of sitting around and looking at old photo albums. It's really, really great entertainment. And so this is a picture of my mother's family lined up in front of their house. And so I started to try to give them this monument feel, or a little bit of that socialist, realist, heroic feel. This is called The Wedding Portrait, and these are my two cousins that actually now live in England, but were married in China during the Cultural Revolution. And it was during a time when China, of course, frowned on anything that was religious and ceremonial, so their wedding ceremony consisted of exchange of their Mao buttons. And so that is literally taken from their photograph. This is from The Ladies of Bombay, which is a sort of a famous photograph in my family of my parents who traveled from, my father traveled first in 1943, and my mother came a year later. My dad did all kinds of wonderful black market finagling and got money to bring these women over to be with their husbands in the United States. But they had to spend 3 months in India waiting. They'd go down every day and look for a boat. And they had a great time, actually. Their money, they had enough money to live in a reasonable hotel, and they met other Chinese women, and it was a big adventure for them. So this is The Ladies of Bombay, and I wanted to do it in a way that, with the date on the side there, it sort of looked like a roadside historic monument or something. And that's kind of the look that I was trying to get at with that bas-relief. And thank you to Will Tilton for making the wonderful wooden pedestal that he's made a few things for me in the past. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this project, which is the book Mahjong All Day Long. I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of taking and giving back. And I think that a lot of times art is thought of as something that we do for the world. Oh, we're bringing art to the world. Oh, we're playing music for the world. Everybody loves it. They have such a good time. It's giving, giving. But I think there's this huge factor of taking when you're an artist as well. And it became interesting to me to just think about how we take, for instance, in the picture of well, I'm taking huge amounts from Chinese culture, right? But from individuals, like the picture of the wedding photograph, I saw this photo and thought it was so amazing, and I wanted to make it. So then pretty soon I got that piece in a catalog, and I started thinking, how are they going to feel when they see this picture of them in a catalog? And I had to, I said, well, I better ask them. And they were very kind, and they gave their permission, but I think it's a very private thing. So here I am taking from their lives for I'm the only one who's getting recognition for this work. So I think that that's something, and one of the first exhibitions that I had at the Yellowstone Arts Center, where I had some of the images of my parents, those slipcast versions, they drove all the way out from Oregon to come to the opening, and they saw the show in the afternoon, and then they wouldn't come to the opening because they felt that they would feel too scrutinized. So again, that's me getting all this glory from me taking from their story. So I was trying to think a little bit about ways to give back. And one of the ways to give back that I'm very happy with is that I can share the joy of creativity with them, which is really fun. So my sister and I have always wanted to do a children's book. And we both took sabbaticals. This is 2005. We took sabbaticals at that time, or 2002 maybe. Anyway, we took sabbaticals and decided to work on this children's book. And she wrote it, and I did the illustrations. So it's basically very autobiographical about growing up with mahjong in the background all day long, all night long. So here's a couple of pages from that. They're all done on porcelain plates. And then with my mom, who is creative in her own right and has done some Chinese painting, traditional flower and bird, and a little bit of landscape painting, we started collaborating. And I would take traditional vase forms and I would do the good children, and we would sit together in the studio and she would make these. She did the, oh, I get to use the pointer. Do I get to use this plum blossom and the bamboo up here, plum blossom. Anyway, so we did quite a few pieces together. Collaborations. Sometimes she would start and I would paint after, and sometimes I would start and she would paint after. We had a wonderful show at Nancy Birnbaum's gallery when she was downtown, mother and daughter show, and my mom it was just so gratifying to see her take compliments and just be so excited. And when I got a piece in a catalog, she would, I would give her the book and she would just be so excited to see her name in print. So it's been just a blessing to be able to have the time in the studio together and also to see her appreciate it and to worry about how is this going to look and talk it back and forth. So that's, I hope, one little way that I can give back. Because there's all those endorphins that happen when you're creative. So this is another piece, a collaboration. Good children playing ping pong. And then the calligraphy on this piece is, there are things like family sayings and things about how to be a good child, like everything from treat your elders with respect to brush your teeth and don't hit people. So I wanted to talk a little bit about calligraphy in general. Calligraphy is an amazing Chinese discipline, and it is moral. It has a moral aspect. You need to study it. Any cultured person should know how to do calligraphy. It has an aesthetic component, of course, because it needs to be balanced and have the right pressure of brush stroke. And it's scholarly, it's intellectual, and it's philosophical. It has all these different sides to it. So I wanted to, first of all, my calligraphy is relatively lame, but I do get these little encouragements that it's getting better. But with ceramics, you can cheat, because if you make a mistake, you can scrape it off. Whereas with brush and ink, once it's down there, you can't change it. So I made some large calligraphic wall pieces made out of slip-cast bamboo, and that also have more calligraphy on top of them that say those kinds of things. And I think the reference to calligraphy is really important for several reasons. One is that it references language in general, and I think that language embodies culture in a way that very few other things can. The grammar, the vocabulary, the usage, the idioms, all those things are really important in Chinese culture. And my Chinese language is not very good, but it's getting better. But I remember growing up, my sister can speak Chinese much better than I can, and I could hear her say in Chinese, "This one can speak, this one can't." And thus it's like always a big issue for me. So it's an understanding that if you know the language, you have a much better understanding of what the entire culture is like, I feel. And then another aspect of the language, or of using calligraphy, is that I like to put in something that you can't read, a language that you can't read. For instance, in the speech bubbles, there's all this foreign language, and there's something wonderful about not being able to understand something, about seeing something foreign. And I think that's one of the reasons that multicultural art is really important, because it's really good to be exposed to something that is foreign. It's going to widen our perspective, it's going to make us more accepting. And I think that is one of the reasons that multicultural art has kind of risen in the past 10 years, because of an appreciation of that and this world getting smaller. So I love, Raphael brought an artist once that did a lot of stuff in Spanish. And so I think that it's wonderful to just look at it and go, I can't read that. So here's a detail of that piece. And then the third thing is that art itself is a language, which is kind of my topic here. And art is a language that is visual, so it manages to bridge non-communication. So I think that those three things are really good reasons to use some aspect of language in your work. I think it all kind of ties together. And this is another really wonderful artist named Xu Bing, who is a Chinese artist who does a lot of the kinds of things that I really appreciate. He takes aspects of Chinese culture and plays with them, or simplifies them, extracts elements of them. So this is Chinese calligraphy that doesn't say anything. It just takes all the elements of Chinese calligraphy, the brush stroke, the composition, the types of mark making, the types of symbols that are within most Chinese characters, and he's done huge installations with this kind of stuff. Things with beautiful scrolls that go from rooftop to roof, or huge banners that go from floor to ceiling. Books upon books upon books of this fake calligraphy. He's a very interesting artist. So someone that I do appreciate. Okay, I'm going to take a little side trip now to China. So I've taken 4 trips to China, and the most recent one was in 2008, in which David, my husband, and I, and a bunch of other artists went with me. Bobby Tilton, who's sitting right there, who is really a wonderful traveling companion. We went to Jingdezhen, the porcelain capital of the world, to do a little workshop. I just wanted to first show a couple of images from my family. So this was my most recent sabbatical, fall 2008, and the first half of the trip was spent with family. So this is Tiantan, which is the Temple of Heaven in Beijing. This is the wonderful bird's nest, an incredible piece of architecture. And then my family. So I have about 60 or 70 relatives that live in the Beijing area, or Tianjin, which is about 2 hours away. And they are incredible family. They're very, very close. They really just love spending time with each other. So anytime there's an excuse to get together, they all get together and have a banquet. And what usually happens is there's a huge spread of food, and then they start taking pictures. And it's like it goes on forever and ever and ever, and it's all the different permutations. So we have my mother in the middle, and then her sisters and brothers and various. This is the calligrapher that I was telling you about that has given me her papers that I collage into my work. And one way that I give back to her is that I send her money when I use her calligraphy in my work. But in any case, so this particular configuration is the elders with all the women. And then there'll be the elders with all the men, then the elders with all the kids, then the women with their wives, then the people under 60, then all year of the cow. And so this goes on and on and on. And they have no problem. They just they go forever. But the true result of the banquet is this. And they're just absolutely stuffed. And I just love the way that the older people are lying on top of the younger people, on top of the older people. It's a great relationship that they have. We took another way maybe to give back a little bit is that we took 3 couples on a trip to Guilin, and did a bunch of sightseeing. And this was taken from the bridge, and we took those little bamboo boats down the Yulong River. It was just exquisite. It was a wonderful time. And some of them had never been on a plane before. We went to the airport 4 hours early because they were so nervous about being on the airplane. Anyway, it was really fun. And then we split up, and some of us went to Jingdezhen. So this is the pottery workshop run by a woman named Carolyn Cheng, originally from Hong Kong. She has several residency programs set up, one in Shanghai, one in Beijing, and one in the porcelain capital. And so this little relatively small city in China, in southern China, is where just about anything porcelain that you have seen in a restaurant or the little tchotchkes, or giant tiles like 6 by 8 foot tiles, all porcelain, single fired tiles are made. Every place you look down the street, you'll see something related to the ceramics industry. And so we did this workshop where we chose classes to take and learned techniques, and just had a great time. We went on lots of little field trips. So we like to laugh at this picture. We're getting a blue and white decoration. That's our teacher pacing in the background. And I just think we look like we're at the 4-H camp or something. But we all had a great time. And we learned how porcelain was made in the old days. So this is a hammer mill. So the water would come down and turn the water wheel, and then these, let's see if I can point. So these sticks would go up and down, ratcheted by these things. You know, every so often that would make them lift and come down and go up and down. And they would throw raw porcelain rock into here, and these would come up and down and pound them into powder. And then they would. That's the traditional way of making the porcelain. And some of the techniques are just completely different. So this is for the ceramics kids that are here. They're totally different from the way we do things here. They throw things, they throw huge pots, and they throw them usually in sections, and they attach them when they're dry. They don't attach them when they're wet. And they have, like this guy, and everything is compartmentalized. So this guy is probably a trimmer and a attacher. He may not have thrown these pieces. Somebody else might have thrown them. And then they come along and see this bead of slip here. That's usually poured on with a saucepan as the wheel is spinning. The wheel only has 2 speeds, slow and fast. Their clay is horrible. It's like cornstarch. It's thixotropic. So if you wedge for a while and then you let it sit, it'll just kind of bloop out after a little while and get wet again. I couldn't throw anything more than about 8 inches with it. Anyway, it was just tremendous. They wear these baggies on their legs, and all their tools are homemade. Their studios are, this is a typical studio. There'd be a garage door that opens onto, that's just exactly the width of the building, and they're usually unheated, and there's just all kinds of, their little part of the work is going on in these little factories. And most of the factories were left over from imperial times, where porcelain was made for the emperor, and then after that, the communists took over, and then after the communists deregulated, a lot of these places are just kind of trying to make it on their own with piecemeal piecework. You'll see a lot of molds, amazing mold makers, just fabulous multi-part mold makers for all kinds of objects. And you might be just walking down the street and see a million rubber gloves, or many, many Chairman Maos in different positions. Bobby brought one home. Sits there watching TV. And then they make these giant, giant porcelain vases in that technique where they're done just section by section. So these are all in the same room, so that the throwers are in the room, and the people putting them together are in the room. They have ladders so that you can get higher and higher, and the kiln is in the same room. The kiln is one great big tall electric kiln that is just tall enough to fit one vase. And the painters are in the rooms. And most of these painters, a lot of the painting is done with decals or with some kind of transfer. There's pouncing, where you have a drawing that has little tiny holes, and you can take ink and rub it through so that you have like a dot-to-dot diagram, so you can fill in and make, finish the drawing, so that they get hand-painted brushwork, but it's all laid out in advance. That's Phil Hamilton. Some of you guys may know Phil. He's in several of the bands in town for full-grown men. He came with his wife, Janet, who was a former graduate student. And Martis Neno is in this picture here, too, who is Bobby's cousin and teaches at Spokane Falls Community College. This is how they pack them, wrapping with straw. These are sort of medium-sized vases. They might just haul them to the store in trucks. And then here you'll also see OSHA would not approve. You've got the guy spraying right next to the guy painting, and you can see all the overspray on the walls. And they're really skilled, because this painter probably has painted this over and over and over and over again. And you'll be walking down the street and you'll see these carts that take, the other job might be the cart person, the person that takes the work from the maker to the kiln or back. these wonderful little wooden carts that you just see all over town. And this is our work, going to the kiln, this little tiny work. And this is that's the pottery workshop in the background. And then just really quickly, some work that I did since China. One of the techniques I learned was this carving, double carving that they do, where you carve on the outside with a hard line and carve on the inside with a soft line, with a soft edge, and you get this little white edge where the glaze pulls back. This is another good children prunus vase. That's the traditional vase form. There you can see that, the technique. You can see how there's this little white ghostly image that comes forward. I loved Celadon. I also used these decals. You can buy decal papers and just get all those classic dinnerware designs on your plates or your pots, and just by rubbing them on like a stick-on tattoo, a temporary tattoo. And some other pieces that I've done since I've been back that have to do with the Celadon, that lovely Celadon classic glaze that was made to imitate jade. That was why they had jade. By the way, porcelain was more expensive than gold for quite a while. It was the material. That's why the imperial factories loved it so much. This is a piece called Flood that I did last year, and it has it's got these little babies in these buckets. And what am I doing now? I am working on a second children's book, which is called Auntie Young's Great Soybean Picnic. This is page 1 in process. And you can see I'm drawing on greenware. You can see pencil line and then the black underglaze outline, and then it's partially filled in with underglaze. And a piece that's at the halter off of the soybean picnic ideas are these little plates that have this is called grain de soja. It's French for soybean, and I thought the plates looked very French, so I gave it there's a lot of French writing on there in addition to Chinese. And then they go from 1 to 17, and then there's one that says rien. And then, for those of you who know me through my other life, this is the Big Sky Mudflaps in 1981, I think, on the Today Show. And this is 2 weeks ago. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.